My name is Debbie Kennett and I'm here today to talk to you about the genetic genealogy revolution and how DNA testing is helping to transform our family history research. I've been involved in DNA testing since the year 2007, but in fact DNA tests were first introduced in the year 2000. In the early years, only a handful of tests were sold each year, and there was a very limited range of tests, and they were also very, very expensive. It was only really in 2017 that DNA testing started to take off in a big way, and in 2017 more tests were sold in that year than in all the previous years combined. And now by halfway through 2020, it's estimated that over 35 million tests have been sold around the world. And we can see the increasing popularity of DNA testing reflected in coverage in the media. And you may have seen a few weeks ago the Long Lost Family special about foundlings who were able to use DNA testing to identify their biological parents. That programme is still available on the ITV Hub if you're in the UK. Ant and Dec went on a journey to meet some of the relatives that they had found through DNA testing a few years ago, which took them to both Ireland and America. And DNA testing is even now being incorporated into the plot lines of some TV series. So there was a recent story on the detective series Vera, which revolved around somebody having an unexpected result from a DNA test. And the Eurovision Song Contest in 2019 was sponsored by the DNA testing company MyHeritage, so that helped to increase exposure to DNA testing to people in continental Europe. We didn't get to see the ads here in the UK because of course it was broadcast on the BBC without any advertisements. So how do we use DNA testing in our family history research? So the first point to bear in mind is that a single DNA test result on its own is not very helpful. The power of DNA testing lies in the comparisons with other people in large databases. The more people who test, the bigger the databases, the more success we get out of genetic genealogy. You can use DNA testing for verifying your family tree, so it may be that you've been able to research all of your family lines and you can identify all 32 of your great-great-great-grandparents. But how do you know that your genealogical research is correct? So you can take DNA tests and compare your results with your cousins to see if those cousins match in the way that you would expect, and to verify that your genealogical tree corresponds with your genetic family tree. It can be a good way of finding long-lost relatives. It may be you've got somebody in your family who emigrated to America, to Canada, Australia, and DNA testing can be a good way of putting you in touch with the descendants of those people who emigrated. It's also a good way of testing hypotheses about relationships. So you may want to know if two people are full first cousins or half first cousins. So if you take a DNA test, you can see if they match, see how much DNA they share and which relationship is correct. And sometimes it can be a way of breaking through brick walls. It may be you will get a match with someone who has the long-lost copy of the family Bible, or someone who's done a lot more research than you have on one particular line. Or it may be that it just provides you with a new way of evaluating your evidence and seeing it in a different light. Now, because the DNA databases have grown so exponentially in the last few years, what this now means is that people who previously had no way of finding out about their identity can now get answers through DNA testing. So someone who is adopted can now take a DNA test even if they can't access their birth records, and it's possible that they will be able to identify their birth parents. And there was a case recently of a pensioner in Ireland who took a DNA test and who was put in touch with her biological mother, who turned out to be still alive at the age of 103, and they were able to meet up in Scotland. Someone who is donor conceived, the donors were originally promised anonymity in most jurisdictions, but now that anonymity can be breached and someone can take a DNA test to identify their biological parent by finding matches with genetic cousins in the databases. And foundlings who previously had no way of knowing anything about who they were and where they're from, they also can now take a DNA test in the hope that they will be able to identify their biological parents. And there was a very well-known case a few years ago of a foundling called Anthea Ring, and she was able to identify both of her parents through DNA testing, even though both parents were deceased. And that actually involved a lot of advanced DNA techniques to make that identification. But DNA testing can also reveal surprises. One of the most common findings is that someone will take a DNA test and discover that their father is not their father. It's also possible to take a DNA test and find that you have close relatives, such as cousins or even half-siblings that you did not know existed. And men can sometimes take a DNA test and discover that they had children that they knew nothing about. And some of these findings can be quite profound. So if someone was donor conceived, they may not only take a test to discover their father was not their father, but they may at the same time learn that they have large numbers of half-siblings. So in this one particular case I've shown here, someone discovered that they had 20 half-siblings, but there have been documented cases now where people find that they have over 100 half-siblings in the database. And we're also finding some really extraordinary stories. We've had now 6 cases at least where people have discovered through DNA testing that as a baby their parents took home the wrong baby from the hospital and they were switched at birth. And that can be quite an extraordinary experience, especially when it's made late in life. These 2 ladies here made this discovery at the age of 72. But what is absolutely fascinating about these discoveries is that invariably people always seem to say that they are happier knowing than not knowing, however extraordinary the finding may be. I don't want to go into too much detail or too many technical details, but I've just put this one slide up just to explain some of the technical terms that I will be using as we go through this talk. So DNA comes packaged up in structures called chromosomes, which are found within the nucleus of the cell. And we each have 23 pairs of chromosomes. We get 1 set of chromosomes from our mother, 1 set of chromosomes from our father. 22 pairs of those chromosomes are what is known as autosomes, which give us autosomal DNA. And the other 2 pair of chromosomes are what are known as the sex chromosomes. So if you are a female, you will get an X chromosome from your mother and an X chromosome from your father. If you're a male, you will have an X chromosome from your mother and a Y chromosome from your father. The other type of DNA is what's called mitochondrial DNA, and this comes from the mitochondria, which are floating around in what is called the cytoplasm, or outside the nucleus of that's found in the middle of the cell. And we each have sometimes hundreds, if not thousands, of mitochondria within each of our cells. And mitochondria are essentially the battery pack which gives us energy.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. To watch the extended, uninterrupted version, go to familyhistory.tv, link in the description. You will also find a host of talks from other experts on a variety of subjects. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when these videos become available.